One of the biggest surprises to me was the absence of critical points and absence of sudden transitions in complex systems. Much of the hypothesis of early network theory was that networks emerged through a sudden network transition, that is, the sudden phase transition, in which nodes that previously were disconnected suddenly become connected. What we learned in the last decade is that's not the case. Rather, networks emerge through gradual addition of nodes and links, and there is no magical moment before which there is no network and after which there is a network. Similarly, when it comes to tipping points, a very popular concept out there, one thing we learned through the work of Alessandro Vespignani is that when it comes to the spreading of ideas or viruses in networks, there is no tipping point, because even very weakly virulent ideas and viruses could actually spread to a certain degree. So if anything, the modern complexity theory was a theory of the absence of tipping point, of the absence of phase transitions, despite the importance of the concept in general of understanding material systems and so on. Emergence is one of those words that the general public loves a lot. Science popularization people likes a lot, but as scientists, we have no idea what it means. We think that we have some idea, that we think of it as being the emergence of some order state in a system where there previously wasn't any, but scientifically speaking, there is no precise definition of emergence. There is nothing we can actually measure, so that would actually say, here is an emergent property. However, just about every system where there is something new appearing is actually called emergence. It's really hard to define what it is. It's a bit like pornography. You know when you see it, but it's really difficult to find a precise definition of what it means and how you see it. In the last decade, we have a true evolution of understanding the structure of complex systems. That is, how things connect to each other, who's communicating with whom, and so on. And that understanding was driven by the emergence of large maps that really helped us to study scientifically this problem. We all know that all of these networks have a role of carrying some dynamical process of them. The internet carries information, bits of information. The metabolic network carries, at the end, a flux of materials and chemicals and so on. We don't have enough data really to have a good theory of dynamics on these networks. There are lots of guesses. Everybody knows how important it is to understand the dynamical processes of on these complex systems, but lacking the experimental data that would drive our research, right now we actually have a zoo of results, rather a coherent theory on that. In contrast with the network topology, where I think we reached the point where we have a very coherent theory of how things connect to each other in nature, technology, or society. Heterogeneity is hugely important in complex systems. And one example is the huge difference in the number of links different nodes have on the World Wide Web or on the cell. You know, some web pages on the World Wide Web, like Google, has hundreds of millions of links pointing to them. Others, like my web page, has a dozen or none, as a matter of fact. In the same way, in the cell, some of the chemicals interact with hundreds of other chemicals. Others interact with only one or two. One of the story of the last decade of complex systems was to understand the origin of these heterogeneities. And in some cases we do actually, and we have very precise theory to describe them. And we also understand how important they are. Because of these huge differences between the nodes, it makes a very important difference whether you knock out, for example, a hub or you knock out a small node from the network. So this heterogeneity has a very, very strong impact on the system's ability to function and the system's ability to withstand errors and failures. Well, that's exactly the big question. Where is the line between order and disorder? I have a very particular belief to say there's very little disorder in complex systems. You know, for example, my behavior to you who don't know my habits may appear to be completely disordered. You can't say where I'm going to go tomorrow. You can't say what I'm going to do 5 minutes from now. None of that is disordered from my perspective. I know exactly where I'm going to be tomorrow, and I know exactly what I'm going to do for 5 minutes from now. So often the disorder is not a true disorder in these complex systems, but it is a lack of information about the mechanisms and the motivations that drive the particular nodes or particular components in the system. So in that respect, I think that we focus on the disorder because we don't really understand the nature of the order in the system, but better we understand the systems, less of a disorder we would see, and more order these complex systems will become.